I'm E. Scott England, and Anchored in Education is the podcast dedicated to all things education. Educators across the world routinely engage in conversations surrounding fundamentals, concepts, and new ideas that improve this great profession. Sometimes we agree, other times we disagree, but at the end of the day, we are all anchored in education. Back in the fall of 2022, I received a message from Efraín Martínez asking if I would like to be on his podcast, Wisdom and Productivity. I agreed under the condition that he would one day join me on Anchored in Education. And while today is that day, I wanted to give you a little background on why I was so excited to host Efraín. He has an incredible story, one that is riddled with ups and downs, wins and losses, happiness, and tears. In my research before putting together an episode, I found captivating articles by major news outlets that had Efraín as the focal point, sharing candidly the struggles and successes that have helped define who he is as a person and a leader. I think many times we want to share similar stories, but we are afraid to share them for the fear of what others might think. And then there is the podcast he hosts, Wisdom and Productivity, a simple concept that approaches each episode in the same way and yet produces fresh content with every new episode. I can learn so much from Wisdom and Productivity and the man behind the microphone, and it is my opinion that you can too. Efraín, welcome to Anchored in Education.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for the invite.
I'm really excited for this conversation that we're about to have today. I think it's inspired me just on what I have read so far and just, listening to the podcast that you have. But we can't get into that until we find a little bit more about you and how you became anchored in education.
Thank you so much. So I began my journey into adult life wanting to be a writer. Okay. So I thought I could be, as a day job, I could be a professor of language and literature, but my real passion would be writing these books and all that kind of stuff. With time, right? Sometimes you have dreams of doing stuff.
Yeah.
But when you realize the work that you have to do and you match that with your talents and your abilities, I came to realize that that was not going to work. I was a terrible student, I would say. I definitely didn't have the discipline to be a writer, not even a discipline of being a good reader. Right, sure. Which is fundamental in order to be a writer. So I came to Chicago to do a master's, got accepted in the doctoral program, but I got stuck because I did not pass the master's comprehensive exam, which was the literature of Spain and Latin America from the 1500s to the 20th century. And that was a big hit. So when I didn't pass that test, I said to screw academia, I'm going to leave. And, you're out there with a bachelor's and there's no job because you have no experience. And when you have no experience, you just have to pick whatever it gets you. And I landed as a database coordinator, eventually secretary and office manager in 3 different hospitals. And let me tell you, I hated it too, because I was doing something I was not meant to be. But let me tell you, you learn lessons anywhere you go. So the lesson I learned in those 3 hospitals was this. Part of my job was delivering mail and often coffee or meals to the professional development event of the medical doctors.
Okay.
And as I was serving, and I kind of like be on the side or in the back of the room, putting the sandwiches and the coffee and all that kind of stuff. I will observe how the medical doctors learn. And that really caught on me on the actual art of learning.
Okay.
How serious they will take it, how they respectful were towards each other, how esteemed, like they were all like Dr. So and so, Dr. So and so, and I'm the cardiologist here, I'm the internist, like so. Like I have never seen something like that, and that is something I brought with me to the education field on how serious educators have to take professional development that is continuous and that it counts with the knowledge of others.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing that I brought with me from my childhood is thinking that I knew everything. What a big mistake. So
Right.
fast forward, I got into the process of thinking, okay, so I hate doing this. I'm not going to make it into academia either. What I have done in my life that I truly enjoyed. And that was that when I was doing a master's, in order to pay for it, I will be a teacher assistant. And unlike a teacher assistant in most subjects where you are supporting a professor and maybe there's a small group and you review the lecture with a small group of students, when you are a TA of Spanish or any language,
Yeah.
you teach your own classes.
Okay.
And I taught first and second year Spanish to college students. And I enjoyed it so much, that interaction and that instruction of the students, that I realized, you know what? I'm going to be a teacher. So I got into an alternative program, became a teacher. I thought high school was going to be my place. Did that for 2 years. Oh my goodness, failed terribly. Then I try K to fifth. And the first day I taught kindergarten, all the students were crying because I was too loud. But by accident, I stumbled into a middle school classroom, and that's where I found my niche. My quirkiness and my weird stuff just connected with that age group. And that's when I realized, you know what? I'm a middle school guy. And that's where I started to find some success in education.
Yeah, and then from the classroom, you have ventured into administration. Now you're a principal, and you've returned and you have your doctorate. And so, going all the way back to the beginning when you had talked about that you wanted to be a writer, where do you stand on your relationship with writing now?
Thank you. So I never stopped wanting to be a writer. It's just I didn't know by then that there was going to be something called podcasts that was going to come out in the future.
Yeah.
Perhaps for people like me that have the artistic initiative to express things, but I didn't know how to do it. And writing was not my thing. Painting, well, my wife is an artist. Painting was not the thing. But through podcasting, I will say it is the modern graffiti combined with poetry, because it allows you, with the combination of social media such as Twitter, to practice your writing. It's just in another way.
Yeah.
It's different, right? Like when I write on the second sentence, I'm already thinking, oh, what did I put wrong? What do I have to fix? But when you speak, I can speak for hours and hours, and when you can express your artistic synergy in a way that is free flowing, as in podcasting, I didn't know that was going to be invented by then. So I still believe that artistic vocation that I had since I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer and express my things, it was going to be through the podcast medium.
Oh, absolutely. What a great segue into the next question. But before I get there, I just want to acknowledge, and I guess back up what you're saying for those who have not immersed themselves in the world of podcasting. There is a whole lot more than just turning on the microphone and begin to talk. And you're absolutely right. The writing is something that is, to make something flow, you've got to be able to have that. But now, since you've talked about podcasts, I want to talk about your podcast, Wisdom and Productivity. And it's, it's great because I've listened to the podcast, but then I just listened to how you became anchored in education. And it shows me that wisdom and productivity is something that you have been seeking throughout your entire life, and maybe you didn't acknowledge it as wisdom and productivity at the time, but I mean that's clearly how you go from setting up sandwiches in the back to realizing what you want to do. So Wisdom and Productivity, a fascinating podcast. It approaches each guest in a similar fashion in terms of the questions, but wow, does it produce fascinating results that are unique to the guest of the day. And so where did your idea to pursue wisdom and productivity come from?
Thank you so much. So this is how it started. So I become a principal, and you go to grad school, you do entry plan, and you become so enthralled as this is going to be the salvation for any school. And you think that, things. So you apply to schools. And I applied to two. One said, heck no. And the other one was in their fifth search for a principal on that tumultuous time. And on the night of the forum, the other candidate who was already a principal, I was an AP by then, who was already had everything that you need to be a successful principal, drops out because he accepts a position elsewhere. I will always be grateful for him. So they say, you know what, we don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So they pretty much give it to me, and I start as a principal, and I start feeling bad. Like I'm talking about new channels, people cursing in meetings, people went to my home through eggs.
Oh, wow.
Like people saying Facebook, let's go beat up this guy. It was terribly. Everybody was hating Efraín Martínez. So what happened? Eventually I learned that of the things I could control, I never thought, it never crossed my mind that I was not thinking of how my message was landing in the people I was trying to lead.
Sure.
So I will say stuff like, oh, Scott, listen, this lesson plan needs to improve because remember, students are what matters the most, right? So it sounds good, but I never thought that what the other person, how the message was landing was, oh, so you think I don't care about children? Let me show you. And that will create controversy and animosity between that person and the other. And this is how I learned that lesson. It occurred to me, listen, like I have to do something different. I'm going to conferences, I'm reading books, and this is continuing happening. So what if I go and shadow successful principals for a day?
Okay.
So I started visiting principals that they had all these prizes or scores and stuff like that. And that's when I saw the magic. I saw how they talk to their staff, how they look at them, how they position their body, how sometimes they would put their hand in their shoulder or in the arm, how they put their feet. Like it was like a slow motion movie on how powerful they were in terms of like leading their buildings. But also I saw their staff on how happy they were to work there and how much they believe in the mission. And the cherry on top was after every meeting or after every encounter, then I will go to their offices and in private, they will tell me all these things. Like, for example, well, this group is more difficult because this teacher or this person or this parent. So when you go there, you have to think and you have to. So it was almost like a chess game, right? The chess game of leadership. And I never would have thought about it unless I would have seen it with my own eyes. And this is the part that really stuck with me. One of those principles, not to be named, is amazing. We go to his office. In his office, he has a bunch of shoes because he likes to have like fancy shoes, and one of them is a pair of replica of the Pope shoes.
Okay.
So I see those red shoes and I say, "Hey, how cool, you have the Pope shoes." And he comes and tells me, "Yes, because sometimes you have to walk through these hallways like you are the Pope." That really stuck with me, right? And what he meant was, listen, when you're the Pope, you have to go through all the nations and different churches and philosophies, and everybody's telling you things, and you have to remain calm. You have to remain with your mission presence and understand that people are coming from different ways. And that's when the podcast idea came. First, I thought about a blog post, right? I didn't think much about, because this podcast, who's going to talk to me like with this thick accent? Who's going to even right? And I was in a principles group. Principles in Actions were called. It was nationwide, and I got accepted. And Adam Welcome, who I will always be grateful for, is talking, and the first thing he says, "Well, anyone has any questions? What do you guys want to talk about?" And nerdy me raised my hand immediately in that Zoom meeting, and I say pretty much, "Hey, I had this idea, but I don't know where to start." He said, "Just go do it." Before now, I was for 10 years blogging about skateboarding and blah, 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 and nobody was listening. But it's not about who listens to you. It's about what you do. And I almost felt like he gave me permission to say, I can do this. And this is wisdom and productivity.
I love that. And I love the advice that you got from Adam. And then not only did you get the advice, but then you went and you did it. But I think so many times we overthink, or we doubt ourselves, or we convince ourselves that what we have to say is not important, what we want to do is not going to be received. And ultimately, that doesn't matter, because we can't predict the future. We just need to go out there and do it and take that step. Now, my question on, when you talk about you went out to observe quality principles in their setting and everything, what were the characteristics you were looking for to identify a principle so you were going to watch a quality one?
Well, I thought that being a good principal was being an instructional leader, right? So initially, I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to see these principals all day long, observing classrooms and giving feedback and talking about Lucy Calkins and all that kind of stuff. But not one of them did. All of them dealt with andragogy. Okay. The learning of adults. They were all experts in how adults learn, and they were empathetic. You could feel the connection they had with their staff, with their students, with their community. But I also saw when they didn't, right? And realized that, hey, this is not a perfect formula. This is not like all these successful principles, they have 100% support. It ain't going to happen. There's always going to be a margin of error.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
There's always going to be the hater, which gave me a lot of peace, right? Because I had a lot of haters. Even the Mexican consulate sent a letter saying, stop bullying Mexicans, immigrants. Like I'm married to a Mexican. like it was like, oh my goodness, yeah. Right? And when you see it like that, it must be true. Maybe I'm doing this, and realizing that that when you're in a position of leadership and power, you are always going to have naysayers.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the naysayers might be right because you are
Yeah,
not perfect either. You are missing something, right?
that's right.
And what I realized is that I thought the principal had to be the smartest teacher in the school, but it's not. Because if you're the smartest teacher in the school, you should be in the classroom teaching,
There you go.
right?
Yeah.
The coach never gets in the field to score the goal. Never, never. The coach can only see the game from the sidelines and give information to the player on how to actually score the goal.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, like, I'm trying to reach. I was trying to get literacy endorsements and all that stuff because I thought I was so incomplete. And then with experience, you realize that you are never going to be complete. Like Mike Louisville said, you are an unfinished leader.
Yes. I love the unfinished leader and working at just finishing a little bit more of me every day, knowing that I remain unfinished. And it's funny to listen to you talk about whenever you become principal, you have all these groups that don't like you. Whenever I had my principal interview at the job where I was eventually hired, one of the questions they asked, it was, what are you going to do when somebody comes in, they don't like you? And I mean, like, I was like, oh, what do you mean? How would somebody not like this? And I mean, it was, I end up giving an answer, but I did leave thinking, like, I smile. I'm a good guy to get along with. Like, how will nobody? And then, like, it did not take long before somebody came in. They just didn't like me, and it was solely because I had the title principal, or it doesn't matter what it is. But I just, it's refreshing to hear that I'm not the only one to share that same perspective. So now,
Yeah,
you've had a lot of episodes of Wisdom and Productivity featuring a wide variety of guests. And so over the episodes, have there been pieces of wisdom that were just so profound that you had to put them in your own practice?
absolutely. And for me, it's like one day principal evaluations are going to include the work that we do as podcasts. This is just a new thing. Usually people go to one or two conferences during the year. And you and I know that there are conferences and there are super conferences.
That's right.
There's some that is better. The networking is better than the learning. And there are some where absolutely it's almost impossible to network because the learning is so amazing. But those conferences are so unique. And I see each podcast interview as that type of conference. I'm like game time. Like when someone comes, like for example, when you were in my podcast, it's like, I'm there to learn from you, right?
Yeah.
So I designed the wisdom and productivity questions in a way as if, what kind of questions will I ask if I go and shadow you in your leadership position of where you are kicking some butt? I will ask you about your wisdom, like who you are. And I will ask you about your productivity. How the heck do you get to do all this stuff? So of the 100 and something people I have interviewed, I picked some of the best quotes and I had them here for you.
Okay.
So they go in like this. From Jeff Days, he said, remember who you are, right? Because like I said, when I began, I thought I had to be all this expert in everything, no grammatical mistakes and everything, quotes. No, like you are there because you bring a set of skills.
Sure.
That are needed. And in a team, you need a forward and you need a guard, right? You don't need 4 centers, right? You need right. Your specialty. So bring who you are.
Who you are, yes.
From Sue Holmes, she said, be grateful for the gift of minutes. So she was talking about her spouse has a medical condition and, he might die any moment. So every minute counts and it makes you appreciate life much more. From Jessica Cabin, she says, pause more, push less, which is amazing because with this No Child Left Behind and all that kind of stuff, we're always pushing. We don't stop for a second to see the humanity in people. From Dave Stovall, perhaps the equity quote that never leaves my mind. He said, "Since when historical accuracy becomes a threat?" And now that we have states like Florida and the AP of African American course being disbanded, like we are here freaking out for historical accuracy. We are seeing it as a threat when it can be a lesson learned.
Sure.
So we can be better today. From Barbara Martinez, she told me, understand policy in order to change it.
Oh, yeah. I like
Which
that.
is amazing because, you know, we all want to be principals and we think about teachers and students and family, but often we don't think about policies, right? And often change cannot happen because policies are antiquated, right? And if we ignore them, we cannot change them. From my boss, Mike Lubelfeld, he said, embrace criticism. Like, especially when you start as a principal and anyone points at the finger, you are like all scared, like, oh my goodness, they saw that I made a mistake. No, embrace the criticism because regardless if it's coming from a good or a bad way, it's always going to make you better.
Yeah, that's true.
From Carl Pullein, who is a productivity guru, he said, the definition of productivity is your relationship with time. And it's like, amen, right? Like we all have 24 hours, but somehow people like you and me can do a podcast and still live a life and start the day with all this learning. It's all about time.
Yeah.
3 more.
Oh, yeah.
From Eric Scheninger, he said, stop finding time. Make time.
Make time.
Right?
Love it. Yeah.
Right? From John Bartlett, he said, you get one shot at raising your children. Which is key for principals. And that often, like I know educators who have given their life, every single ounce of their life to their schools to try to fix and extinguish the fire. And they have ignored their children. Yet 20 years later, their children resent them and the schools are still on fire because there are so many things out of our control.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. And finally, Danny Bauer, he said, exceptional leaders have thinking systems. And this means like before, when I started as a principal, I will wake up, get my hair done, eat breakfast, and go to work and show up. Okay, let's do this. Instead of like making time to yourself to prepare yourself for what is coming, doing your schedule, knowing who are you going to meet, knowing what you're going to be next Thursday. And those thinking systems make you a successful person.
Wow. I tell you what, and that's just a small snippet of the guests that you have come in and you know, loaned you, and by loaning you, loaning all of us some of their wisdom. And I love every bit of it. I could sit and listen to quotes all day long of guests you have had. Let's talk productivity for a minute because it was the second to last quote from our friend John Bartelt talking about you only get one shot to raise your children. One thing I greatly appreciate about when you record with guests, and including today, you do it early in the morning. So, I mean, like you're up before 7, so you can be in front of the computer connecting with guests. So, and you told me this helps with your schedule and more importantly, maintaining time with your family. So it makes sense considering you consider productivity to be a great tool for life success. What other productive habits have you learned over the years that you would like to share with listeners?
Absolutely. So there's a book called The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. And the book says the philosophy is like before the world begins, you begin, right? And I learned that way when I was a kid. My father, who was born in 1927, was a World War II veteran. He would wake up at 5 a.m. every day. And when he wanted to support me with studies, he would wake me up at 5:30. And when you were a kid, you hate it, right?
Right.
Maybe my father didn't have the capacity to intellectually explain to me the value of this, but definitely he showed me the habits. So when I read that book, The 5 a.m. Club, it just connected that when you own your morning, you elevate your life. So on a day-to-day, my recommendation is leaders, teachers, educators, anyone, wake up before anyone wake up and do what is for you first. So by the time I get to work at 7:30, 7:40 in the morning, I wake up at 4 in the morning. I exercise, I meditate, I read, I listen to podcasts, take a shower, take my time, make my coffee, eat breakfast, hug my children and my wife. And by the time I'm in my car for my commute, I have already lived, right? I have lived. Another productivity thing is that the day before I leave to work, I plan the blueprint for the next day.
Okay.
So I know what I'm going to do the following day. I already, in my mind, is imprinted that I have to meet these people. I have to make space for this. I have to work on that. And going even more backwards, on the Friday, before you go home, I do a blueprint of the whole entire upcoming week.
Oh, okay.
So I know already what is going to happen during that week, where I'm going to be. Sometimes I have to I'm interviewing people during the week that might not be able to do in the weekend. So I make space for that, or I need to work in an evaluation, or I need to work in some sort of report. So making time for those things instead of having in my head a million things. Oh, I know how to do this. I know how to do the report. When I'm going to do that? Okay, I have to do this. Okay, let me sit down, write down your ideas.
Yeah.
Because if not, like your brain, David Allen says, your mind is great to generate ideas, but it's terrible at keeping them.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
Right? Write down your ideas. So then you can maneuver the ideas instead of the ideas maneuvering you.
I love it. And you're absolutely right that we have so much going on in our minds, and not just as principals, not just as just as humans, and the capacity we have of all the things we have to do, that if we don't have any sort of organization, then it's almost like we stall out and don't accomplish anything. Now, did I understand right? You're up at 4 a.m.?
That's it. That's right.
All right.
4 a.m.
4 a.m. And I was hearing about all of these things that you're doing from 4 a.m. to the time like during the week when you get to school. And so, you're meditating, you're working on yourself. And so I want to transition to talk about social emotional health for a little bit. And so you opened up candidly in a Chicago Sun-Times article in 2018 about your past. How do you use these experiences in your approach to serving students, many of whom are going through struggles we may not see on the surface?
So I think everybody has a vocation for something. It's just sometimes it takes time to marinate what the vocation is, right? So I knew I wanted to support people through my writing, inspire them, and it was in the hopes of escaping my reality as a child and the traumas that I lived. And when you are a child living in trauma at home, in a way you become an actor because you go to school and you keep it to yourself. Like when I grew up, there was no TikTok. Right. So where everybody's saying all their secrets, right? And my parents were very good, especially my mother, at saying, hey, when we go to this place, don't say that. And when we go to this place, in this place, you're going to say this. And they were preparing me on how to act or say and withholding that suffering that I was going through. And that lasted through all my my life until I became a principal. And I encountered a difficult school that was in a tumultuous moment. Like I said, people cursing and yelling at you, and the threats. And I also didn't know how to be an empathetic leader. I was a sympathetic leader. So this love that I had to support the students, seeing them as my own children, or seeing them as me, that child who had suffered and didn't have anyone to support with. And when they will suffer, I will suffer with them. And one day, I am the cherry on top was when I was called and they told me that the sister of one of my students had died, and in a car accident. And that's that, like, I just lost control, right? And I felt like life would have been better if I wasn't living. I was at the lowest point in my life. I had concluded that my family, my wife, my children would have been better if I wasn't present, because I was all trouble. I was such a dysfunctional human being, always in trauma, always suffering. And when you are depressed and anxious, like, I was always living in the past, always angry and upset at life. And I decided to take a leave of absence for the first time in my life, actually the only time in my life. And the best thing I did was that I went to online and I researched, what do the wealthy do when they go in these retreats, mental health retreats?
Right.
And I did it in my own home, like a homemade version. So, for example, when people will go to the pool, right, I will go in a hot tub that I have, and I will do that equivalent, or take the sun and be outside and meditate. I will do it by myself. And the best thing that I came up with was, I took a plastic plate and I started writing on the plastic plates the names of every person that had hurt me, and I put my mother in the middle.
Okay.
And I fill out that plate completely. And then I turn it around and I put the names of all the people that I had hurt. Because part of the exercise was admitting also that I wasn't perfect.
Sure.
Nobody is.
Yeah.
And I have failed some people too. And I took that time through meditation and mindful activities, to visit those places in my mind. And our mind is so powerful, it will do anything you want it, right? Our brains are like in a box and we are controlling them. So through meditation, I will visit those moments where I realize, oh, wow, there's nothing I can do about that. That is in the past, right? Or I was a child, or I only knew this much about that, or something was happening due to something else. And that way I started connecting the dots, like Steve Jobs says, to make sense of my trauma and realize that those are things that most of the things, like 8 out of 10 things, were things outside of my control.
Yeah.
And the last one, it was my mother. And I came to forgive her, to understand that she was also human, and she had also gone through traumas herself, and she was just trying to do the best that she felt she did, but she tried. And seeing the good in the bad made me a good person. And let me tell you, Scott, I also suddenly felt that all this weight that I was carrying, it was symbolical. It was not real. I was making it real. And let me tell you, my health, my ability as a principal, my empathy, everything improved because then I realized, hey, listen, you can love your children, but you have to love your children like the surgeon in the room. So when someone goes through the emergency doors, the physicians and the nurses and the police officer there, the security, people cannot start being, oh my God, what happened? You're hurt. Oh, I'm so sad. I'm so sorry, right?
Right.
Our job is to understand the pain and support from there the best way that you can without looking for the final ultimate outcome of everything's going to be perfect and dandy. Just understand that life is full of suffering. Life is full of trauma. And there are some of us that are leaders that are called to support those to the best that we can, but understanding that the trauma is still going to be there, that tragedy is still going to be there, and you still have to maneuver, you still have to do your best to make others and yourself feel that there's hope at the end of that tunnel.
Yes, there is. And when we talk about this, of course, we only have limited time when we come together for the podcast. But now when you talk about your healing process, when you took that leave of absence, I mean, it was something where you had to be intentional every day in working on yourself. Am I understanding that right? That it didn't just, it wasn't like in a week you realize, oh, this is what it is. It's something that's intentional, and you have to not only after you figure it out, so to speak, you got to keep working on it. Is that right?
Every day is working on. That's why waking up at 4 in the morning, because I was giving all of myself to everybody, but I was ignoring me. And if you are not complete, you cannot give anything to anyone. I still remember the first day, right? I thought at my first day of leave of absence, oh my goodness, I'm going to be all day playing video games, watching TV, taking a break from all this craziness.
Yeah.
But when my wife left that day with the children and they say bye and their kisses and they close the door, I heard that door like a boom. It was like day one of this reconstructing of yourself and understanding. And I didn't know the outcome. I had no clue, right? In fact, I was thinking, this is probably not going to work. I'm always going to be this crazy guy with this like nightmares and waking up all in sweats. But the reality is that like ancient philosopher says, often we suffer more in our imagination than in real life. And that is so true. It's just that we live in a society that sells you the idea that one day you are going to retire with enough youth and wealth and health, and everything is going to be perfect. Everybody around you is going to be great, no tragedy, and you're going to live a lovely life. And the reality is that that doesn't exist. So why wait until you retire when you can live your best life day to day? So all my work as an educator, as a principal, as a podcaster, on Twitter, is to tell that kid that is living in trauma that they can make a better person of themselves, that they can overcome the past and make their future.
More advice, more words of your wisdom that I'm absolutely loving and just hanging on to every word. Why wait? And absolutely, why wait? Hey, before we go, this is something that we have it's been interwoven in and out of the conversation about the principal role. It can be a very rewarding role. We know this. But it can be a very heavy role, and you've talked about some of your experience. I have my own as well, and often we find them rewarding and heavy at the same time. So, what recommendations do you have not only for future building leaders, but those who are currently in the position, but maybe are finding themselves stalled, or we hear this a lot. It's true. They're burning out.
So I remember my first year as a principal, leaving my school building at 11:30 and 12 midnight, working, and I will tell my family, I'm sorry, I had to stay, I had to finish this, so tomorrow I don't have to do it. And with time, you realize that the schools are always going to be burning. Always. There's always going to be something, right? And doesn't matter what plan you have, the moment you enter into that building, you're going to be interrupted every single second because someone needs something.
And it's the most important thing. Whatever they need is...
Yeah. Exactly. And in that moment, right, you have to have enough wisdom to pause, to listen, because for them, that is the most important moment. And you have to be able to say sometimes no, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to forget of being liked. You have to remember that the mission is to bring the best that you can with the things that you can control, right? So the advice for beginning or people who want to be principals or they're in the trenches is forget driving to work thinking, oh, today I have all this stuff. No, just know that you're going to go and there's going to be fire and you have to get your hose and extinguish as much fire as you can. You have to embrace the power of your team. Mm-hmm. You have to delegate. You have to practice distributed leadership because you are not Superwoman or Superwoman. You cannot do everything. And in fact, often the best leaders are not the smartest in the building. They're smart enough to recognize that other people have talents, and sometimes they have their own insecurities. So your job is to elevate them. Your job is to ensure that every student in the school at the end of the day can feel welcome. They can feel that they're embraced and loved. And for that, you have to support your staff with the wisdom and productivity of getting things done in a way that is in peace and calm. Forget about nobody gets into this for the money, because no matter how much your paycheck is, it's not enough for all the things that you will have to endure. So you have to base your work in love. Mm-hmm. But not the love of sympathy. Like I was that day suffering for that child who has lost her sister, right? You cannot be suffering with the students and your staff in a way that you will suffer if you have lost your own child. You have to distinguish the love and make it into empathetic love, like the love of a surgeon that is in the emergency room, trying every day, case by case, to bring the best out of each patient. And that is the position you need to play, the position of empathetic love. If you have that, you will succeed.
I love it. I love the wisdom and productivity that you have dished out on Anchored in Education today. I'm going to link your podcast on my website because I want people to after they listen here, they need to go listen to Wisdom and Productivity. Efraín, thank you so much for joining us on Anchored in Education today.
A pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite. Keep doing great things. I believe that we are better together. And when we communicate with each other, you know, you influence me in my side, I influence you in your side. And we can, in that way, support each other's communities.
100% agree. Energized by our conversation. Thank you. You can read more about Efraín on today's episode page. Simply head over to my website, escottengland.com, and click on the podcast tab at the top. And don't forget to subscribe to Anchored in Education on whatever platform you get your podcasts. There are some people who you can talk to and immediately get a sense that you're in amazing company. You can feel your cup being filled as they speak with you in a real and disarming way. These people don't wax philosophically, though they certainly could, if they so chose. Instead, they engage, dare I say, enrapture you with a conversation that only lets you down when your time together ends. And one of the things they do better than conversing is listening. You can tell, whether in person or connected online, that they truly care about what you're saying and how you feel. Efraín Martínez is this person. If you haven't already, follow him. Check out his podcast, because listening and talking to amazing educators like him is a great reminder of why it is so important to be anchored in education.